Haribol. So, welcome everyone. I'm back again to try to read a little more from this book. I don't know why it's acting like that. Bond of Love. Srila Prabhupada and his daughters. And I'm on a very, maybe one of the most nectarian sections. Yamuna Devi Dasi. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desa Tarane. Yamuna Devi Dasi. In September of 1966, she was in New York for 10 days to attend the wedding of her younger sister, Janaki. During that time, she heard Prabhupada tell the story about love and lust called Liquid Beauty. That story was like a punch in the solar plexus for her. She cried and thought, that's true. In the material world, there's no so-called love, but there's nothing like the real love that Swamiji speaks about. After New York, I left with Janaki, who was the first woman Prabhupada initiated, and her husband Mukunda Das, who was one of the first 11 male disciples Prabhupada initiated. We went to San Francisco and picked up two old friends, Sam Spirsta and Melanie Nagel, who turned out to be Shamasundar Das and Malati Devi Dasi. With their help and the help of a few more interested people, we started the San Francisco Temple in January 1967. Srila Prabhupada came to encourage and guide us. And when he went on his daily morning walks, anyone could go with him. So I was walking with him in the morning and I said, Swamiji, do you think sometime you could allow us to go to Vrindavan with you? Prabhupada turned around and said, yes, I will take you to Vrindavan one day and I will show you Vrindavan on foot. I thought that was the most hopeful thing I'd ever heard in my life. And I was just waiting for that time to come. In 1968, August, we went to London to try to start the British Yatra. And about a year later, Prabhupada came, and on the invitation of John Lennon of the Beatles, stayed with his disciples in John Tittenhurst Park estate. After his morning walk on the estate, Prabhupada would sit alone in his little greeting room, take off his socks and sing prayers while he played his harmonium or the drum or a pair of kartals. One morning I was sitting silently in the stairs outside his room, listening to Prabhupada singing. I don't know how he knew I was there, but when he finished, he called me. I went in, he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm listening to your singing. It's beautiful. He said, do you want to come and listen? I said, very much. Yes. He said, you can play drum and I will play harmonium and Purushottam can play kartal. Then for several mornings, we recorded Srila Prabhupada singing a prayer to Narottam Das Thakur by Narottam. Vigyapati Hari Hari Vipale. Hari Hari Vipale Janame Gainu. Manusya Janamai Pai. Radha Krishna Nabhajiya. Jaya Jaya Sudhiya Visukhain. When I heard Prabhupada sing this, I said, what does this prayer mean? Because he didn't have songbooks at the time. he explained the meaning to me that, "O Lord Hari, I have wasted my life. Although I have taken a rare human birth like a miser, I have served Radha and Krishna. I have not served Radha and Krishna, and thus I've knowingly drunk poison." Then Srila Prabhupada sang this bhajan. He went so deeply into this mood of the prayer that I have not served Radha and Krishna, that he repeated the line 8, 9, 10 times. Then he sang the next verse 8 or 10 times, going deep into the meaning. Golokera Prema Dana Harinama Sankirtana Ratina Janmila Kenenai Samsara Disanale Dia Nishehiya Jale Jodayete Na Ainu Pai. The treasure of divine love of Goloka Vrindavan has descended on the congregational chanting of Lord Hari's holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Why did my attraction for this chanting never come about? Day and night, I'm burning in this dark world without working to make a correction. After he'd sung this song, Prabhupada said, "So Yamuna Prabhu, what is your favorite prayer?" I only knew the prayer from the introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, so I said, "I like the Shri Shastra prayers." He said, "That is very nice." I said, "Swami, what is your favorite prayer?" And he said this one, Hari Hari Bipale. A party of about 20 devotees, a third of them women, arrived in India on October 4th, 1970. And until March 72, several traveled throughout India with Prabhupada, serving together and chanting the holy name in Nagar Sankirtan like a close family. By Prabhupada's mercy, he allowed women close proximity to him in his personal Sankirtan party. In our Vaishnav history, this was revolutionary, and the effect it had in India was profound. In fact, it shocked India. Every place we went, the front page of the newspaper would have an article on the dancing white elephant of devotees who were going through the streets chanting the holy names. At the Magh Mela in February 1971, Srila Prabhupada was speaking from the sixth canto for the first time, the story of Ajamil. Everyone in our party loved to hear Prabhupada. To be with Prabhupada was one thing, but to hear his Bhagavatam class every morning, we would run for that. I would sit right next to the Vyasasan at Prabhupada's lotus feet. In my early years of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada was so open and merciful to the ladies that he never gave much structure of separation. But at the Mela, Chutananda Swami, who had been living in the Gaudiya Math temple for some time and who was aware of the etiquette, told me, "Yamuna, have you noticed where all the other women are sitting?" I said, "Yes, I have." The other ladies were way in the back. But Chutananda Swami said, "You should be sitting there too." So the next morning, I sat way in the back. Later that morning, Prabhupada called me. I went into his tent, paid my obeisances, and before I got up, he looked at me with plaintive eyes and said, "You didn't like to hear from me anymore?" I burst into tears and said, "I love to hear. I like to hear from you more than ever." Prabhupada said, "More than anything in the world, all I want is to hear from you." Prabhupada said, "So why you weren't sitting?" I said, "Achyutananda Swami told me it was the etiquette that I sit far in the back with the ladies." Prabhupada was quiet. Then he said, Yes, that is etiquette. I said, Prabhupada, how many times were you with your Guru Maharaj? He immediately said, since I met him, I have never been away from him, not for 1 second. But I was a little forceful. I said, but how many times were you with him physically? Prabhupada said, very few, maybe 5 or 6 times, but they were intimate and meaningful to me. Then he said, many of my godbrothers were big sannyasis, and uh, thought that associating with the spiritual master personally was most important. But in some cases, they are no better than mosquitoes on the lap of the king, and that is the business of a mosquito. It is simply to suck blood. So I don't think that that's the only way to associate with the spiritual master. You try to hear. For me, this was a tremendous learning moment. Up till then, I couldn't conceive of being separated from Prabhupada or that he would die. But at this time, I realized that there would be a point in the future when I would be physically separated from him, and I would have to come to terms with that. Make an adjustment here so I can get the light properly to see the book. In March of 1972, my husband and I were stationed in Vrindavan to help start the Krishna Balaram temple. Srila Prabhupada wanted Vrindavan and Mayapur to be places for pilgrims to come from around the world to hear that in the Dham and to taste the beauty of the Dham. He wanted an international guest center with vibrant Krishna conscious activities going on, and he wanted prasadam distribution. He said, especially in Vrindavan, you won't be recognized so much for your scholarship, but if you distribute prasadam nicely and if you worship the deity nicely, you will be respected. Prabhupada mercifully revealed Vrindavan to us, sometimes with encouragement and sometimes with chastisement. While we were trying to do the Vrindavan project, Prabhupada gave us lots of chastisement. Chastisement is a special relationship that one has with the spiritual master. And sometimes it's difficult to appreciate its potency when you're being chastised. But in retrospect, it becomes relishable mercy that we continue to learn from years and years later. When you get chastised, you feel your energy change, and sometimes it takes a long time to put the beauty of that chastisement into perspective. Once, Srila Prabhupada uh, was in Delhi when I came from Vrindavan and joined him there. Although he knew that I was part of the Vrindavan Party project and was just visiting the Delhi temple, he said, how could you have let this happen? I didn't know what he was referring to. Prabhupada said, you have left Krishna sitting on a fence post. I tried to explain, Prabhupada, I'm just visiting. I don't have anything to do with the deity program here. But Prabhupada chastised me because it's a disciple duty to try to preserve what the Guru has given. I have trained you in deity worship, and he felt that I should extend myself to the Delhi temple also. It is also said, he also said to all of us, you may think this is a stone statue and an idol standing before you, and you may think, let me give this rubbish garland to this stone statue, and Krishna will not mind. But if you do that, Krishna will remain a stone statue for you forever. So please take care. We made it clear how important it is to be attentive to our service to Krishna and our service to Krishna's devotees. Under the merciful instruction of the spiritual master, in a loving way, we're supposed to help each other go back to Godhead. That's a glorious thing to explore because there's no end to it. As long as we're breathing, there's no end to the potential of helping and each other become Krishna conscious in every minute minute of our existence by following the instructions of the spiritual master. In the beginning of the Vrindavan project, I was the only woman in the party. All the others were men, and all of us had important roles. My role was the D department in Prabhupada's rooms. When we made the temple, we made every mistake you can make, and one really big mistake was the floor in Prabhupada's room. It was an amalgamate floor with the wrong mixture of black, so that when it dried, the black color continued coming off, and nothing we did stopped that black color from coming off that floor. Prabhupada said, "Who has done this?" I made the ridiculous comment, "Srila Prabhupada, I'm not sure what to do." He said, "No intelligence. There's no intelligence there." "That's very true, Srila Prabhupada. Do you have my suggestion how I could do better and take care of the room?" He said, "No, you figure it out." It took many months before the floor was clean. Prabhupada was strict with me about cleaning. When he went for his morning walk in Vrindavan, we had a whole cleaning system, and every surface of his room was cleaned twice. One morning, Prabhupada came back from his walk, sat down at his desk, took his mini staple gun out of his plastic protective sleeve, opened the staple gun so it was flat, rubbed his pinky finger over the space between the knob and the staple, and said, "Dust. Who has cleaned my room?" I said, "I did, Prabhupada." He said, "Haven't I trained you how to clean the room?" "No, Prabhupada, I'm so dull that I haven't even thought to look there for dust." Asara, useless. Prabhupada was strict with me in many ways, but I treasure that today. I treasure that dust in Srila Prabhupada's staple gun, because when the spiritual master is strict, it helps us to be conscious of what conditioning means. Otherwise, conditioning is just a word. The statement, "I'm conditioned from time immemorial," it's hard to wrap your mind around. Conditioning is a huge thing. Unless the spiritual master trains us, how will we get out of our conditioned state? So when the spiritual master chastises us by giving instructions in simple things, it's helpful. Srila Prabhupada came in and out of Vrindavan many times in 1973 because we Western disciples had no knowledge of the language or anything to do with business of the many social customs of the Holy Dham, but we were trying to build the Krishna Balaram temple. We had to accept the obstacles that Krishna put in front of us to help us learn how to get out of the material world. And Srila Prabhupada had to come many times to help us move in the project toward this timely fashion. Once Prabhupada, for a short time, and afterward Tejas, Gurudas, Shamasundar, and I brought him to Delhi airport. His plane was delayed, and we were sitting in a little group waiting when we heard this click, 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 clack, click, clack coming from a 20-year-old girl with a tall high heels, black stockings, and a mini dress. Shamasundar said to Prabhupada, "We're not in Vrindavan anymore, Prabhupada." Prabhupada looked at him and said, "Yes, we are in Vrindavan. This is not Vrindavan." That made a light bulb turn on in my eyes. You leave Vrindavan, but Vrindavan is in your heart. We can drink in Vrindavan using all our senses, and when we leave the Dham in Vrindavan, we can bring its atmosphere with us wherever we go. We can drink in Vrindavan. That means drinking in Vrindavan. Every time I remember these defining moments with Srila Prabhupada, I learn from them. Prabhupada once made the simple, obvious comment that in order to remember, you must hear and chant. He said, "Your remembering will become less effective to the degree that you hear less and chant less." So these three things, hearing, chanting, and remembering, which are part of the 9 process of bhakti, are also the core of my relationship with Prabhupada. Hearing about and remembering Srila Prabhupada are the two most important things in my spiritual life. Hearing and remembering our Srila Prabhupada's beautiful gifts to us, and I'm deeply grateful for that transcendental mercy. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Chamuna Devi ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari.